Hello, in this video we're going to demonstrate how to use the media and media player classes in JavaFX. So we're going to create a program that is basically a simple video player. We're going to load a remote media file from somewhere on the internet, and we're going to have a very simple interface with play and pause buttons and a volume control for our video. So let's jump over to Eclipse and get started. The first thing we'll need to do is create a new Java project. And I will call this media demo. We're going to add a new class to our project, also called media demo. Give us some space. Okay, so inside our class, we're going to make our class extend from application. And we're good to go. What we're going to do before we write our start method is specify the URL for the media player, the media file that we're going to use. So we're going to have a private static final string, which we will call media URL, and we're going to initialize this string as the following URL: http cs media. Okay. Alright, so that is the URL to the file that we are going to load. Now that we've done that, we can create our start method. Okay, so what we're going to do straight away is create a media object. So a media object is kind of like a handle, if you like, to some media file or source of media that can be played. So we need a media object. We'll call it media. And the constructor we're going to use takes in a string, which is the path to the file to open. So we're going to pass in media URL. Again, so the media object could represent local media files stored on a hard disk, for example, or remote ones, which is what we're using here. Next up, we're going to create a media player object. So think of this as kind of similar to how image and image view get used. So the image object stores the actual image data, and our image view object is what actually renders it to the screen. It's a similar thing with media and media player. So media player, sorry, I got one step ahead of myself. So media represents a path to some kind of media. We have a media player. Which we're going to initialize with our media class that we just object that we just created. And now we have a media view, which we can add to our window. And this takes in our media player object. Okay, so I need to press Control Space to get our import done here. There we go. So now we have a media object that represents the path to our media. We have a media player object, which is responsible for actually handling the playback. And we have media view, which is actually used to render our video to the window. So what we're going to do now is add this to our window. The way we're going to do this is using a border pane. So what we're going to have in our window by the end of this video is, so what we're going to have is, here's our window. We've got our video playing in here. And then along the bottom, we're going to have some buttons. So we're going to have a play button and a a play pause button and a rewind button. And then we're also going to have a slider for volume. So we're going to use, to get this positioned correctly, we're going to use a border pane, because that will allow us to set the media view to be the center of the window, and we're going to, like in a few of these videos, we're going to store our buttons in a horizontal box. But for now, let's get the media player on screen. So we need to create a border pane. And set the center object to be our media view. Okay, what we're going to do now is set our scene up and our primary stage and get this thing on screen. So create a scene object. This will take our border pane, and we'll set the size to 650 by 500. Next up, we will set the title of our primary stage. Need to actually finish my string constant. Set the scene. And show the primary stage. Next up, we'll create our main method. And call launch. Okay, so now we've got enough that we can run our very, very basic media player. So when I press run, we can see, well, nothing's really happening yet. And that's because we haven't... There we go. It took a little while to load. In fact, this may be limited by a slow internet connection, we'll see. But the video's starting to play. That's great. So now let's add some controls to actually control the playback. So what we'll do is just close this. What we're going to do is create a few buttons. So we'll do that here. We'll create a play button. And what we'll put in here is just a greater than sign to be the play symbol. Next up, we'll create a rewind button. And we will create a slider for our volume. So what we're going to do here is set the preferred width of our slider. To be 150. We will set the maximum width to so SL volume dot set. So we've set our preferred width, and now we're going to set our max width. And what we're going to pass in is actually a constant. We're going to use region dot use preferred size. So what this means is when our components get arranged in our window, it will use the preferred size as the maximum. Alright, we're going to set the minimum width now to 30. We don't want our slider too small. And we're going to set the initial value to 50. So next up, we are going to create a horizontal box for all of these components that we just created. So a new hbox, we will set some spacing to 10. We'll set the alignment to center. And we will add our two buttons and our slider. Actually, what we'll do is also add a label to say volume. Okay, so now let's run this program. Oh, of course, I need to add the horizontal box to our border pane. So set bottom. Okay, so now when we run this, we have something that looks a lot more like a media player now. We've got a play, pause button, a rewind button, and a volume control. So nothing is actually happening when we press these yet, but, you know, that's okay. we'll set up some listeners to handle that. So what we're going to do now is set up a listener for our play button. Now our play button is really a play pause button. So what we want is if the media file is playing, then we're going to pause it, and if it's paused, we're going to make it play. So what we're going to do in here is if play button dot get text, we're going to use the value of our text that's displayed on our button as our toggle for whether it's playing. Another way would be to ask the media player or the media view whether the video is playing. So if the text that's currently displayed on our button is equal to the greater than symbol, which it should be, because that's what we've just set it to, then we are going to call media player dot play and change our play button to be a pause button by changing the text. Like that. Actually, I made a bit of a mistake here. This is actually should be part of our listener. So what I'll do is I'll just do that now. So what we want is an action listener for our play button. So play button dot set on action, and we'll use a lambda. Now, this is what we wanted. Inside our lambda, we want this if statement. Now, if the text on the play button does not equal the greater than sign, that means that we currently have a pause button, which means we will go media player dot pause and set the text back to a greater than symbol. Alright, so let's test that out. Save and run our program. We wait for the video to load. And we can press play. And when we do that, the video starts playing, and then you can see here our pause button has in fact changed to a pause button. Fantastic. So I'll just pause that, and the button works as we expect. Great. So what we'll do now is set up the listeners for our rewind button and our volume control, and our media player will be complete. The rewind button, the listener for this is actually a lot simpler because we don't have to do any comparisons like what we did here. All we need to do is when the button is pressed, rewind the video. So, rewind button dot set on action. Again, we'll use a lambda. And all we're going to do is rewind the video. So the way we do this is get our media player, and we call the seek method, which seeks to a particular point in time. So what we want to do is go back to the start of the video or when the time is 0. However, we're not just going to put in 0 here. We're going to use the duration class and use 0, the constant defined inside duration. And that's all we need for the rewind button's listener. We just, as soon as that button's pressed, rewind the file. Easy as. So what we're going to do now is set up the listener for our volume control. So let's go back down here. What we're going to do is we want to listen to when actually no, what we're going to do is we're going to bind the volume property of media player with our slider's value property. Remember how we can use property binding to do this, so we don't have to write any extra code. So this becomes very easy. What we want to do is get our media player and get the volume property of our media player, and then we're going to bind this to our value property of our volume slider. However, we also need to divide by 100 to get a percentage or a number between 0 and 1. Our slider by default will have a maximum value of 100, and we've currently set the video to set the value of our slider to 50. So what we're going to do then is divide this by 100 to get a number between 0 and 1, which is what our volume property expects. So with that, let's run our program again. Okay, we wait for the video file to load. Okay, now what we can do is press play, and the video starts playing. We can decrease the volume, and we can increase the volume. We can pause the video and resume it again, and we can rewind the video. So with that, we've made great steps to making a fully functional video player, which is fantastic. So I'll close this now. So with that, that's pretty much it for this video. We've learnt how to use media, media player, and media view to play media files. We've used remote files, but it also works just as easily with local files. And we've created some listeners to control our media player playback and the volume of our media player. So that's it for this video. Thanks a lot.